Hello, everybody, and welcome to 3 Point Perspective, the podcast about illustration, how to do it, how to make a living at it, and how to make an impact in the world with your art. I'm Jake Parker.
I'm Lee White.
And I'm Will Terry. And all three of us are professional illustrators and have been working in the industry for a combined something like 50 years or something like that. You guys are looking at me.
Will's nervous because he's off script right now. We challenged him.
We've illustrated a crap ton of books, and we've worked for every publisher in the business, something like that. And
every single one.
Just about. And we've also been working for like forever. So there you go.
That's true. We actually have probably worked for every publisher because little note to you guys who are just getting in the business, there's only like 4 publishers and they own all of the imprints. So wherever they are, even in different states and stuff, they're still owned by these same, 4 or 5 publishers. They used to call them the big 5, but I don't know.
I bet there's some small publishers we haven't worked for.
Anyway, each week we're going to come at you with a different topic. And most of the time we're going to agree, and sometimes we're not going to agree, and then Will's going to say I'm wrong, but he's actually wrong.
All right.
We have fun with this, don't we?
Oh, I should add that we had a reader. Today's topic, I'm going to go ahead and dive in. Reader questions. Somebody sent a message to us saying, I really don't like it when you guys are mean to each other. Why do you have to be mean to each other? So we should say we are totally great friends, and we are not serious when we are bagging on each other.
Right.
But sometimes crying yourself to sleep at night on your pillow is therapeutic.
It does feel good. I always do that on podcasting days.
It bonds us together more.
We do have Skype group cries. Anyway. All right. So
I just want to, first off, Lee and Will, I just want to say, I see you. I see both of you. Okay, we can move forward.
You should see us. We're on Zoom. We have cameras, so you should see us.
Okay.
I lost my questions now. Okay, so today we're going to do reader questions because you guys all the time are chiming in with different questions. And so I went to our forums and I went to my email. And
you will not shut up.
No. Yeah, please stop emailing us. No, I'm just kidding. We love getting the questions. And so I paraphrased down because a lot of them kind of have the same thing and reading through them. Sometimes you guys get wordy. We wanted first advice is to streamline your question. Like, here's a problem I have. How do I fix it or whatever it is? But so I've paraphrased them down into just kind of a basic grouping. I think I have 12 questions, and then Jake and Will can obviously chime in with other questions that they get. You guys ready to dive in?
Yeah,
ready.
Let's do it.
Okay. My image never comes out how I want it to. How can I fix that? Or what's the best way to fix that? I thought I would start and then you guys can chime in because I actually have a...
You mean you're going to give them the wrong answer and then
I'm going to give them the wrong one. I have a new method that I'm going to challenge you guys, the listeners, to go through for this specific problem because I see this one a lot. And this is actually the topic of my first YouTube. I missed my YouTube deadline, so I had a lot of people sign up for my YouTube channel, and there's nothing really there except some demos. But this is going to be the topic of my first demo. It's basically, or my first YouTube, is these steps to go through. The problem that I see is not a drawing or painting problem, or sometimes not even a concept problem that makes the image kind of go south right there at the end. It's not understanding your process. And so my challenge to you guys is to use my check and X's model of building an image.
So you basically came up with a foolproof flow chart on how to create a great image.
I did.
That's a tall. Cool. That's a big claim right there. You realize that.
If I can guarantee you this, if you go through this list, you'll always get a good image. It's bold enough to.
I'm taking notes.
Yeah, I want this.
Okay, here we go. I actually got to write it down because I don't have it.
You're still writing the list?
Yeah, I need to. I'm on number 2. No, I'm just kidding. Hold on.
Number 2 is Draw good.
Number 2, become a great illustrator. Number 2 is like a 5-year step. No, okay, so here we go. So the basic idea here is having this list in front of you, which I'm going to have on my YouTube channel, and I'll link to it here in our notes as well. To have this list in front of you, and if you did each step, you just write down a check. If you didn't do one of these steps, you have to mark an X there. And typically, when I look at people's art and I see the stuff that they're struggling with on the forum, if I went down this list, I'd see X's all over the place. This is the stuff that me and Jake and Will do naturally, and other pros do it naturally because they've done it so much. But here we go. Number 1 is start out with your written concept and do your research and development. What that means is reading, looking, sampling other art, gathering things together. Graphic designers make what's it called? An image board or a concept board, mood board. That's what a lot of times what they put together. Yeah. So those are, and research and development can mean different things on different projects, but just going through the steps, don't just dive in. The problem that I see most students do is that they just dive into the finish and then they're saying, what's wrong with this image? And it's like, oh, the hand's drawn poorly and the composition is bad and the value hasn't been worked out and all this stuff hasn't happened. So you start out at the beginning and kind of start to get into this universe of what this image is going to be. So that's the first thing. And that gets your mind percolating and making connections that maybe wouldn't have been there otherwise. So start with your R&D. Give yourself a day or two on that if you can. I realize that every project doesn't allow that, but if you can, give yourself a day or two of just messing around with ideas. You're not even drawing yet, by the way. This is just writing and looking at stuff. Your next box, number 2.
Can I elaborate?
Oh, go ahead.
Just a little bit?
Yeah. Please.
I can't remember the guy's name, but he taught a character design class, and it was the first time I had ever really, this was quite a while ago, the first time I'd ever really thought about it. He made his students write a lot about the characters they were going to draw. So they, and it really does start there. I think a lot of us try to just make it up in our mind, but we start with an incomplete list. We start with an incomplete story that way. I think when you write down everything about and the description about your character and what their motivations are and what they likes and dislikes and how old they are and just a complete description of a character, then your drawing is much more informed. So I totally agree. I have a character interview sheet that when I'm doing a new book, I fill out the interview as if I'm being interviewed as the character. And it's really interesting. Like, what's your favorite food? All this stuff. Who's your enemy? What is the most embarrassing thing that's happened to you? All these different questions I ask myself to really start to flesh out this character.
That's really interesting. Like, I do that. I've never written it out, but that's everything that's going through my mind as I'm drawing or as I'm developing something is, okay, where did this character, where did they come from? What was their day like yesterday? And what put them in this situation today? So I am thinking those things. I haven't thought to actually write it down, and maybe you don't have to write it down, but if that helps you to be mindful of this, I think that's great. I just want to add too, having a mood board or having some sort of reference sheet for the drawing that you're doing helps you to not go too far off track. So when you're thinking, oh man, this looks dumb, or this isn't turning out the way I wanted, just go back to your reference, your mood board, see what someone else has done successfully, and see where the difference between yours and that one is, and it might steer you back to the right direction. You realize, oh, I didn't add shadow yet. I just did light. Once I add shadow, it's going to make it.
Yeah, it gives you that mood board gives you a bullseye sort of thing, and you can always come back to that bullseye. Whereas if you don't have that, and again, as you get familiar with this process, you can abbreviate it and use it how you want to. This whole process, step by step, is made for you to tweak it as far as you want to. But if you haven't done any of these things, I say be really formal about it and just go through it and do it. All right. So, I was going to say about the character interview. One of my favorite questions is, what's your character's favorite, or if you're answering as the character, what's your hidden talent? And I love the hidden talent because it's something somebody's good at, but for some reason they're not showing people they're good at it. And so what is that about? It's a really interesting kind of mental thing to go through with a character. Okay, so you've done your R&D. There's a box next to that. You've done your research and development. You get a check. And then you move to the next one. And the idea is you don't move to the next one until a check is in that box. It's really clean. So the next stage is thumbnailing. And thumbnails are meant to be rough. A thumbnail is not a clean sketch. I really want to hit that home because some people are like, oh, I did a drawing, but that doesn't mean it's a thumbnail. A thumbnail is a very exploratory process. It doesn't have to be super sloppy. I'm not saying just be sloppy if you're not that kind of drawer, but you just don't want to go into micro detail and draw these little beautiful drawings. It really is I equate it to clay, and you're just kind of sculpting quick sculptures. Like you're just making quick things and you're discarding them just as fast and saying, oh, no, wait, what if I move this over here? Oh, wait, what if I show it from a different perspective? David Hone and I use this method in our illustration class that we teach, and we just have it as teapots. Like we assign 50 different views of a teapot and a teacup. And man, after you get through those first 10, and there's not even concept involved in this, but after you get done with the first 10 or 11, you can start digging. And man, once you get to about 30 or 40, it's really, really good. But a lot of students, I think, you say, did you use some thumbnails? They say yes. What that means is they did 2 sketches.
No, this is a big one. This is actually bigger than I think people realize. And I've worked a ton with students and interns and assistants who are all at the college level, and they'll bring me sketches and drawings that they're doing and say, Jake, give me feedback. And I'll say, this is okay. I immediately see like problems, compositional problems or proportion problems. And I'm like, show me your thumbnails that you did for this. I want to look at those first. And more often than not, it's like, I just went right into it. And I'm like, okay. That's where you went wrong. You wasted so much time figuring it out big on the page when you could have spent, that same amount of time spent doing 30 different little thumbnails and really landed on something amazing and then moved on to that. It's going to make your life so much easier doing it that way.
Will, you want to add anything to that before I move forward?
I'm good.
All right, so you've done your R&D, you got your check. You've done your 50 sketches, and that's just a minimum, by the way. You can do more. But you've done your 50, you get a check in that box, you move to your 3 rough sketches with value. So that is taking your favorite 3 thumbnails and basically make them a little bit bigger. Now, this is not a clean finished sketch. It's just a cleaner sketch than the thumbnail. You're kind of saying, okay, I like this. I'm going to polish it a little bit more and see if it holds up. The reason you do 3 of them is because one of them might not hold up, and the way to be objective is to have more than one option. It's easy to pick things, and it's also, by the way, easy to show other people things when there's more than one option, because it's hard to show somebody, especially who's not an artist, and say, well, what do you think of this image? And it's a sketch. They don't know how to answer that question, but you say, which one do you like out of these 3? Typically people will start talking because now they're not on the hook to say, well, I like it or I don't like it. Right. They say, I like this one the best.
Well, and more often than not, if they're anybody but my wife, they're going to be like, I love it. It's really good.
It's very hard to please artists' spouses. I'm going to throw that out there.
Yeah,
they get so familiar with it. They're like, I don't really like it. It's not great. So if Lisa's stoked on an image, then I'm happy. But if she comes by and she's like,
you're
kind of like,
right.
I like that. I'm just like, oh man, I missed it. All right, you got your concept R&D. You got your 50 thumbnails. You did 3 rough studies with value. I do want to add with value because a line drawing is not, unless you're just leaving it line drawing as a final, the line drawing really has nothing, doesn't look much like the finish is going to look. So think of the rough as being kind of a mini version of what the finish is going to look like. So you can test, like, are these values going to work? Is this composition actually going to work? The only way to test composition, in my opinion, I like to get Jake's view on that because he does line a lot more than I do. But I think you can't totally decide on a rough until there's value.
Mm. Mm-hmm. You caught me a little off guard because I'm like, my brain's going 3 different directions. When I'm doing when I'm doing thumbnails for any sort of like illustration composition type of thing, I do add layers of value just to separate foreground, midground, background. Even though I end up it's line work. If it's going to be colored, then that means it's going to have light and it's going to have shadow and it's going to have, you know, depth, right? So even my thumbnails will have my thumbnails. I'll block in like lights and darks, just you know, a broad pass on it, so that I can see how these things are going to silhouette against each other. So yeah, that happens there. If it's a straight up like line drawing, unless it's like a composition showing a scene, like if it's just a character, value doesn't come into play. But I will do a thing called silhouettes, and this is like the thumbnail version of doing that. You know, if you did thumbnail for an illustration, silhouettes is what you would do for any like single character or a vehicle or a building or a tree or something like that, any single object. And silhouettes are just a straight black, you know, I'll even use a Sharpie, or if I'm drawing digitally, it'll be like the fattest brush I could do. And what that does is it forces you to think not in detail, but in broad shapes. And what are these basic shapes? And you can usually find a really cool, interesting shape quickly by doing silhouettes, then sketching out your character, you know, erasing, you know, the arm and should I make it fatter or should I make it thinner? Should I make the legs thicker? Oh, should the boots come out here? And you're wasting so much time drawing that when you can bust that out with the silhouette so much easier. So that would be like something I would recommend too.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Silhouettes definitely go in there. Okay, so you got your R&D. You've checked off that. You've checked off your 50 thumbnails. You've checked off your 3 roughs with value. And by the way, you can get feedback on any stage of that you want to. You can post it to the forums. Which thumbnails or which roughs do you guys like? That's the stage that I like to get opinions on. I don't show people all my thumbnails typically because I get overwhelmed with it. But I do show the 3 roughs, and that's where I highly advise you guys to start looking to other people and saying which one do you like, and then you modify those. You don't just do 3 roughs and like pick one and just go straight to finish. You pick it and then you modify it because you want that to be right. Mm-hmm. And now the next 2 stages, I kind of flip and flop around. I've depending on where I've been in my career. Now I say once you've got your rough, out of the 3 roughs, you pick the one that you're going to move forward with. I say do a quick color study before going to your last phase, which is your clean sketch. And the reason I say that is because depending on color, sometimes color will change how the composition works. Same way value does. If something's not separating, like Jake was saying, you want light over dark or dark over light, well, you do that a value study. Color will change things a little bit, and sometimes it'll change how I'm approaching the image, which obviously will change the clean sketch after that. So I say do the color study. Some people do the clean sketch and then do the color study right on top of the clean sketch. So either one of those, I don't care. But when I say color study, by the way, that also is not just one. I typically do 3 or 4. I'm doing the finishes for a book right now. The title page, I did 11 color studies for just the title page because I just really wanted that opening spread to work. And I needed to kind of see how it's fitting within the whole book. And so you just do a bunch of them and they're fast. You're not trying to do a perfect little illustration. Again, you're just trying to block in big areas of color. What's the color balance going to be? And then once you have that, then I go to my clean sketch. Go ahead.
For me, just to kind of reinforce that, the reason to do the color study for me, the way that I use it is I want to see where my, like kind of like what you said, where my focal point is going to change. I'm looking to see where my accent colors, my warm colors are going, my reds, in order to, basically create that focal point. And is it working with everything else? I'm not doing it it doesn't take a lot of time. I think I've seen students that have like kind of stressed out about color study because they spend too much time on it. It's just to get an indication of whether you're maintaining your story, whether you're
right.
And you're not detracting from it. All of a sudden you have like maybe you didn't count on the fact that one of your characters has red hair and that the main object that is being talked about is a red wagon or something. And now you see that the character with red hair is clashing with the red wagon, and you got to make some decisions.
Right. Exactly. You got to make those decisions beforehand. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Great point. So after you do that, so now you got your R&D, your 50 thumbnails, 3 roughs with value, a color study, a clean sketch. Now you do your finished painting. Here's what I want to talk about here is that a lot of the reason people don't get the work that they like is A, they didn't put in the preliminary steps, but B, they're also tight. I would be tight too if I have a big canvas or I'm working on this big file, high resolution, and I'm just all of a sudden trying to paint this awesome thing. And now I'm tense because, oh man, I hope people like it. I haven't done any preliminary steps. The whole goal for this whole process is working through each stage in a way that reduces your stress level. Have you noticed on each step of those, there's never a consequence. You're just like, well, I'm just messing around. There's never a time where I'm on the hook as an illustrator. There's never a time where it's a final thing that I have to get approval on until the very end. And so once you're armed with all those things going into your final painting will be the most relaxing stage. And you can put on movies in the background. You can put on podcasts. You're almost not even thinking. Like I'm finishing this book right now. I'm listening to all kinds of stuff. I'm not even thinking about the painting. I've basically already got every bit of the ingredients down, and I'm just putting it in the stew to cook. If that makes sense. Like, yeah. and it's loose and it's enjoyable. It's not this and a lot of students just put so much pressure on themselves because they're going from idea in their head to finished painting, and man, why isn't it coming out? Now I'm stressed and I'm hating myself and I'm hating my work. And this process, I promise you, if you go through each one of those stages and you can actually check it off with a check that says you did it, you'll get a good image.
Mm-hmm. I love it. That's great. Mm-hmm. Cool. Next question.
That was a big answer for one question.
It just happened to be kind of what I'm working on anyway. So here's the question. I'll let you guys talk now. I'm not sure which area of illustration I belong in. What do you suggest that I do to figure that out? So maybe this is a mid-level student. Mm-hmm. They're doing all kinds of stuff. How do they narrow it down?
That is a good question.
I've heard this question a lot of times. And my answer is always the same, which is you obviously like doing something because you're listening to this podcast and you're thinking about becoming an illustrator full time. Pick a project in a discipline in illustration. Maybe it's children's books. Maybe it's graphic novels. Maybe it's book covers. Maybe it's product illustration. Whatever, what made you interested in the first place? Do that thing. Start there. And then after you do that, do a project in another area. You're going to like one more than the other. So I started, maybe this will help. I started as a editorial illustrator. And the reason I did that was because it was easy to get work at the time because there was tons of magazines, tons of newspapers, and they were assigning tons of work. Mm-hmm. I didn't realize that I didn't really like coming up with conceptual illustrations. It wasn't my cup of tea. I wasn't that great at it, but I did it for 3 or 4 or 5 years, probably closer to 5 years. And at one point, around the 4-year mark, I realized I would rather tell stories. So it just became natural. It was like when in my spare time, I was always doing a children's book illustration on my own for my portfolio. Mm. And I started showing them to my rep, and she's like, these are great. These are like, Will, I like these better than your editorial stuff. Do you want me to try to start getting you work in the children's book area? And I'm like, I guess so. Because I never thought of myself as a children's book illustrator in the beginning. It just wasn't really where I
want to see some of your editorial stuff.
Oh, I've got a ton that I can show you.
You don't. You really don't.
Brad Holland.
That's exactly. Well, with your dry brush acrylic, if that's what you were doing back then.
Yeah.
I do picture Brad Holland.
Yeah, and I was following a lot of people that were making a lot of money. I was doing a lot of annual reports, making good money doing that. But it came a point where all of a sudden I was like, oh, I don't like doing this. I'm just doing it for the money. That will always wear off, by the way. Doing something just for the money. It's exciting in the beginning because you're like, I can't believe I'm getting paid. I'm making art. I'm getting paid for it. But after a while, that little itch of I'm not being satisfied artistically will take over. And if you listen to it, it'll take you into a better realm because you'll start feeding your soul more. And it's much more rewarding to make the art that you really want. And so that's how I made the transition. So my advice is just start doing something. You probably won't be able to pick your exact perfect place because you haven't done enough. So start doing, and you'll start to find. Anyway.
What do you, this is going to be a really tough one. I'm going to ask you guys, this is kind of elaboration on what Will's talking about here, but what do you say to somebody who wants to do something that's outside their skill set? Like say somebody wants to be a character designer, concept artist, and we all know the difficulty level of that and the likelihood that somebody's going to get it. I mean, the skill set has to be so incredibly high to be a full-time concept artist. What if that's the area that they're interested in? What do you say, or what do you recommend?
I'll take this one. Your best chance at success is just getting your foot in the door, doing something. So start by doing work that plays to your strengths. So yeah, you want to be a character artist, but you're actually not bad at like coloring or painting, right? And so like I'm thinking animation here, but it could be, it could be applied across the board anywhere. Find out what your strengths are, see what your strengths are, play to those, build a portfolio that really shows off those strengths. The whole time you're practicing, you're getting better at the thing that you really, really want to do, and get your foot in the door. So it might be like, well, I'm okay at graphic design, so you'll get a job at a place that needs a graphic designer. Meanwhile, you could transfer. It's so much easier to transfer through departments, getting your foot in the door that way than competing with all the A players who are also competing for that job. You know what I'm saying? So like for me at Blue Sky, character design would have been awesome. That would have been a fun job. I saw though that there was never a character design job being posted, but environment design kept coming up, and I was like, well, I'm not bad at environments. I could do that. And so I put together an environment portfolio, got a job as an environment artist, was working on environments, and every once in a while they'd be like, well, let's see what Jake can do with characters. And I would get a character design job, and then I would fail at it. They'd be like, you go back to environments, Jake. But the other thing was I wanted to try storyboarding too. Like that looked like such a fun, cool job. And so I would try out for the storyboarding thing. And then I would realize, storyboarding was such a different beast than doing environment design. And I wasn't like cut out for that as well. So I had the opportunity to try out for a storyboard department, realized it wasn't for me. And then I was much more content being an environment artist because I was like, well, better this than failing miserably at something that I'm no good at, and at least I can find success here. So there's that. I think overall illustration, like Will said, it's you just got to try stuff and see what sticks and what works. And if there's something you're really interested in, you want to do it, practice at it and work at it until you have a portfolio that reflects proficiency in that thing.
Yeah. I think that your best you is doing the thing you love. So even though there's a lot of people trying to do the thing, there's tons of competition in every area of illustration.
It's true.
Yeah.
So just do the best work you can possibly do. And an art director might see you for something that you didn't necessarily want to do, but that's the foot in the door that you're talking about, Jake.
Yeah. I also want to add too, like maybe the end game isn't you're getting paid for this. Like that might sap all the fun out of it as well. Maybe maybe your best version of yourself is that you have whatever job that you have and it pays you just fine. And there's no stress when you go to sit down to illustrate because there's no money hanging on the line. There's no career hanging on the line. And you actually get to sit down and enjoy your time doing that. Like, not everything has to become your job as well.
Right.
At least not right away.
I got to add a little bit to what you guys are saying. I agree with obviously everything that you guys are saying there. One thing that I would recommend, though, is interviewing yourself. Remember how I was talking about interviewing a character for a few minutes ago?
Yeah.
Well, you can do the same thing for yourself. And I don't think a lot of people, at least I didn't as a student enough, in hindsight, interview myself. Like, ask yourself, not only a lot of people just look at the finish, like, oh, I like this kind of work, I don't like this kind of work, but you're really talking about the finish, like the way it looks at the end. But how do you like working? Are you somebody who likes working at a really fast pace and doing a lot of different projects? Are you like somebody that likes parking on one image and staying there for a week or 2 weeks, or 3 weeks? Are you somebody who likes physical media? Like, if you're somebody who's, I like to paint big, I like to paint slow, and I like realism, that's probably not a good fit for children's books. You're going to be more of a gallery kind of person that just naturally is going that way. So what kind of person are you? And then, and what kind of work do you like to do? And the pace and the process and all of it kind of goes together. Interview yourself. Like, what do you, not just the final art, you got to look at that too, obviously, but what do you enjoy in terms of the process? Because if you don't like the process, you're not going to enjoy your job.
Good point.
And that's so it can kind of guide you a little bit. You're going to be more in process than in showing the finishes throughout your life. I can promise you that. And so you better like what you're doing.
That's true. Like, it's really nice to have a finished comic book. Like, that's cool. And it's fun to read a finished comic book, but it's entirely different to sit down and draw page after page after page of comic. And if you're not enjoying the act of actually spending a day or 2 days on a page, putting some love into each panel, then maybe comics isn't for you. Yeah, it's a good point. Because there was a while there where I was like, man, comics are really hard. Do I actually like doing what I'm doing right now? And then I realized, like, no, this is actually, when I realized it was less about busting out a page and more like spending some time learning how to draw a character and drawing them in different pose and just having fun with each panel, it became much more enjoyable for me.
I should add that know that no matter which job or which area you pick, there's still work involved. It's not all going to be, roses and honey. It's work and different stages of the job have different hurdles that need to be overcome. I know with doing books, I've done a lot of books at this point, and it's funny because, again, knowing what you like to do and what you can do, sometimes those are two different things. I'm a really fast painter. So up to this current book that I'm working on now, every time I'm taking too many book projects, and then as I go into the finish, I basically have to do a finish painting a day. And there was one period where I did that for like 2 years. I had like 5 books coming out, and I was flying. And it felt like I was just like a fast food server. Like, here you go, just handing out the illustrations. And if I didn't get to the point where I wanted to an illustration, too bad. I had to move to the next one because I was just under too much pressure. And at that point I was saying, Anna, do I really want to be a book illustrator? I'm not liking this. And this book that I'm working on now, I thought, you know what? I'm just going to slow the whole thing down. I'm going to say that, probably shouldn't say this out loud, but I'm going to say that my actual deadline of when I can do it is way farther down the line than I actually could do it, and give myself just more time than I actually think. I could do it faster if I wanted to, but I want to give myself more time, and I'm enjoying it so much more, slowing down a little bit. So you're in control of some of these gears too, how much you take. I see students a lot of time do this move where they want to graduate fast, so they take 5 classes instead of 3, but then they're miserable as a student. Like, they're moving too fast. It's too much work and too much information to absorb. And so you just got to kind of, no matter what avenue you pick, you got to find your pace. And I'd rather say go take on less and do a better job than taking on more.
Agreed.
Good. We could put that one to bed.
Put it to bed. Feels soapboxy today. Here's what you're going to want to do, you whippersnappers. Okay, so this is a question. I guess I guess all three of us are good with this. This is a physical media kind of thing. Can you, I want to make and sell prints of my work. Is there any advice on where to start with that? And a follow-up question to that is, I'm framing for a gallery show. Lee mentioned some framing tricks in a podcast. Can I share that? So I'll go into that in a second. What do you guys think about people making prints? And is that a viable thing to do if you haven't done it yet?
I mean, I think that
go for it, Will.
I think that before you spend any money, you need to have an audience first. I mean, we live in a digital world where you don't have to go upside down money wise. You can, I mean, with social media, the demand will come to you if it's there. Mm-hmm. You might tease it by if you have a decent social media following, you might check people's interests and say, hey, I'm thinking about making a print, or I did make a print. You don't even have to have made it. You can mock it up, but you can say, I've got these prints. I'm thinking about selling in my shop. Is anybody out there? What's the interest level? There's a lot of different ways to do that, but the biggest thing is just, I think artists in general are eternal optimists. We're just optimistic by nature, I think. And just don't be too optimistic with your money that you have to recoup. There's ways to do it without doing that.
Except for Van Gogh, I wouldn't describe him as an optimist.
True.
I mean, 21st century artists, maybe. I don't know. I would say for prints, Will is right. Part one is find the audience first, and just know that for every person that says you should make a print of that, I'll buy it, they're definitely not going to buy it.
For every person, that didn't make sense. Let me fix that. For every 50 people, one will actually buy it.
Yes, for every 50 people, one will actually buy it. So just know there's a lot of talk and not a lot of walk, I guess. What is that? How that term goes?
A lot of sizzle, not a lot of steak.
Yeah, a lot of sizzle, not a lot of steak in that regard. So there's ways to do it, and there's ways to find that audience, but just know it's a little bit harder than you think. That said, once you've got the audience that's willing to buy and you've sort of trained them how to buy from you, you can buy a printer, a really nice inkjet printer from Epson, or I would recommend the Epson ones, and get the nice archival paper and sell 50 or 100 prints, and that thing's paid for itself and then some. And then you're just rolling. Every time you get a print, it's like printing money. So
you might even want to sell, like a lot of people have on Instagram, have a really successful way of posting their originals and selling them, and they all sell, and that might lead into print sales, because if you're able to sell all your originals, there's probably people that really would love to have a print that missed out on the original.
That's a good point. Yeah. I like that.
One thing that Jake just brought up, the word archival. If you're just getting into prints, I agree with Will and Jake in that it's going to be probably a slower road than you think. And so be conservative there, but don't be conservative to the point where your product sucks. If you go to Kinko's and get a print, those prints that come off an inkjet printer or whatever, laser color printer, Office Depot, those kind of things, those prints are fugitive inks. And what that means is those inks are not archivally rated, meaning they will fade in almost any kind of light, even shade over like a 3-year period. Inks from those office supply product places, Kinko's, whatever, will fade. They suck. And so if you sell a print and you cheaped out on that part, you're going to have some very angry customers. And so I always think, even though it's a slow road, the print that I'm handing a customer now, I'm basically wanting that customer for life. I want them to be impressed with the product. I don't want them to be pissed at now that I have their money. That's just the starting point. And so don't cheap out on that. You need archival stuff. That said, you don't have to spend a ton of money. Maybe you go in, what I always recommend for students and early professionals doing this is go in with a group of people and buy a printer. Printers are not expensive. Even the Epson archival 13 by 19 inch printers, $500, $600. You go in with 5 people because you're not printing every day, right? And so that's how I would start is archival ink, archival paper. So make sure those 2 things are there, and then start online. So you have your store, go ahead and get an Etsy shop. Your Etsy store will sell so many fewer prints than you think it will. Even when you're established, they keep changing the metrics for Etsy. I've been doing Etsy for years and some years make a bunch of money, and then all of a sudden it all goes away. Like, wait, I was making all this money. Now there's nothing coming in from it. They keep changing their logarithm. So don't think that you can just put something on Etsy once and have it sell. It's a constant maintenance there at Etsy and re-updating your shop or whatever. But go ahead and get something online. You're not going to sell a bunch there, but you want to have your product flow figured out. Like, here's how I'm printing it. Here's how I'm mailing it, and that kind of thing. Then put it up online. You'll sell a couple of prints. And then the next step is doing a couple of very small shows. You can typically share a table with somebody, like a small Comic-Con or a small publishing fair, whatever. There's all these little shows in different cities, and share a table with somebody. It's super cheap, and don't look to make a bunch of money from that. The first whole year is just figuring out, like Jake said, what do people want to buy? What will they actually buy versus saying they like something, that there is a difference there. And then so start with a small show. After the first year, you'll figure out, hey, people like this kind of image. They don't buy this kind of image. And the second year on, you'll be rolling with it. But that first year is just like any business. There's startup costs. There's research and development that you got to figure out. And so you just got to, but you can do it in these small step ways. You don't have to go all in. And I agree with Will. Don't go all in thinking you're going to make a ton of money.
Cool. All right. What do we got next?
I'll add just real quick, since I'm still on my soapbox today, the framing tips. I posted this on our forum.
Right. There was a framing tips part. Yeah.
If you're doing live shows, which a lot of people do end up doing shows at coffee shops, and then they graduate to galleries and different kind of events like that, framing will come into play. And how you think about building your original images can cost you or save you thousands of dollars down the road. So my tips there are: work in common sizes. If you're framing in pre-built sizes, 11 by 14, 16 by 20, 20 by 24, 22 by 28, these are all very standard sizes. And that's going to be your absolute cheapest framing option is pre-built frames. Even Michael's and shops like that have pretty decent looking frames. But the second you go off that standard size, you just literally quadrupled how much a frame cost.
You can get really nice frames at IKEA.
Yeah, absolutely.
Standard.
Yeah.
I mean, for the price, you can get a really nice.
They look nice. They don't last.
Yeah,
they're good. I mean, they're not.
The quality.
They're not custom.
The quality's pretty low.
but for like $7 or $8 a frame.
Yeah. The next tip I have there is when you are framing something, you are not framing it for the audience. That's what a lot of people get stuck in, and then they spend a bunch of money on frames. A frame is just basically to make the art look okay, to look nice, and to protect it when you're traveling with it. They assume that whoever buys a painting is going to frame it in the way they want to frame it. Everybody's house is different. So when you're trying to guess, what's everybody going to like in terms of a frame for a piece?
It's kind of like packaging almost.
Correct. It's just a nice way to package it. And that takes all the pressure off you getting this super ornate custom frame that somebody's going to change out anyway because it doesn't match their house. Mm-hmm. So get a very standard thing. So the last thing I'll add is weight and depth. So weight at shows and galleries that you might not be in your same city eventually. The depth of a painting, like how far does it stick out from the wall, is an issue because you can't sell a painting that's not at a show. And there's only so much space in a vehicle or to ship something unless you have a ton of money to pay shipping. If you have a real fat frame, that means fewer pieces of art are going to be there. So I always try to frame very thin frames. Again, looking at that from the wall, from the side of the frame. Keep that small. And then a smaller frame, a thinner frame is a lighter frame, which means shipping and moving it around from different shows is going to be less expensive and easier.
Cool.
All right, that's all I'll say about that. I'll add a couple more things in the show notes if you guys want to see that, or go to the forum where I've posted a big, long thing about it. This is a time management thing. What is your favorite productivity hack? Number one, top of the line, not all the productivity tips you have, but what's the one thing that gets you the most bang for the buck?
The iPad Pro.
So it's just a piece of hardware?
It is. It's like, because you can work anywhere. So if you're, if you have a family and you're needed to go, to a ball game, take the kids to a ball game, go to the doctor's office, anywhere. That's been the single most productivity hack I've had. Just being able to work anywhere, vacation.
And the fact that you're not having to prepare traditional meals, what are you comparing that to?
Yeah, so here's the biggest thing. So my process before iPad Pro was sketchbook, drawing, thumbnailing, working out details for an illustration.
Scanning.
I would get it to a decent comp stage, but I needed to enlarge it to continue working on it because I don't throw away. I work up. I work on the same from thumbnail to finish. I'm constantly enhancing it, and I was doing that before digital. So I would use a copy machine to enlarge, lighten it up, draw over it again and again and again, in and out of the computer scanner. And I had to wait until I got home to where I could use that equipment. So it was constantly slowing me down. Well, on the iPad Pro, you can, or any tablet monitor that you take with you. I mean, you can just keep working.
I see Will all the time busting that thing out. I'm watching him when he's at the DMV with my binoculars, in line at Wendy's.
Oh, that's great. I have one, and I go through periods where I use it a bunch, and then I put it away and don't really use it that much.
Yeah. I agree too. Like the iPad Pro was super handy if you don't have like a dedicated space that you're working at all the time. If you've got a setup at home, but then you have a day job and you got to go to there. If just having that thing with you is good. But I think for me, a free productivity hack would be batching tasks. So there's such a huge cost, like a inertia cost in switching gears all the time. And so what I mean by that is checking email and then moving away from email and working on, a drawing, and then seeing an email pop up and checking email again, and then getting lost in email or checking your Instagram, doing an Instagram post, and then, going back to the drawing. All of that is like every time you switch gears, it takes a few minutes if you're good, 15 minutes if you're normal, to get back into the gear of what you were doing before, right? And so what I do is any sort of administrative tasks, like I've got to do a post, I've got to check email, I've got to answer direct messages, I've got to handle finances. All of that stuff is sort of busy to do work. And I'm not going to split it up in the middle of creative work. So I'm going to batch all those tasks at one point of the day. I'm going to check all my email at one point. I'm going to check, all my Instagram stuff or social media stuff at one point. And then that leaves me like as much constant time to work on creative stuff as I can. So I could carve out 2 or 3 hours uninterrupted of just doing creative stuff. And so that's my hack.
That's good. That's sort of in line with my hack too. So I'll just add on right on top of that. I totally agree with what Jake is saying. That's super smart. My hack on top of that is to figure out how many of those batches you want to work in a day and just block them out. And then again, I'm using, just like I mentioned earlier about going through an image, I use checks and X's. I say my day's broken down to like 1 50-minute admin block, 4 blocks, 50 minutes each. And because you just got to figure out how long you can work with focus. So 4 blocks of doing book work, and then 3 blocks of doing either gallery or just personal work. And I go through each one of those and I just check them off as I go. And so as long as I've got each of those blocks written, they're all in my iCal, and I blocked them all together. And I find that I enjoy the day quite a lot. And be willing to change it, obviously, if something interrupts it or something messes up. So I'm constantly moving that stuff around. But I am trying to say, looking at it from a long point perspective, how many things do I need to get done in a day? And if I do 7 or 8 blocks of 50 minutes at a time, I typically am finishing a bunch of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's cool.
So easy breezy. All right, this should be an interesting one. Should I do a monthly art challenges like Inktober and Mermaid? What's the pros and cons?
Can I take that one?
Take it.
You don't have the credentials to take that.
All right. Here's what I say. Figure out what your goals are as an artist and see if these challenges support that. Okay. So what I mean by that is I had an assistant who was getting all, making all these plans, what he was going to do for his Inktober project, how is he going to get it finished, what he's going to do with it afterwards. And I stopped and I said, this is all good. This is really exciting stuff. But what's your number one priority right now? Oh, I need to get a portfolio so I can get a job at the animation studio. Okay, that's really good. That's very important. How is Inktober going to help you spending all this time on Inktober going to help you with your portfolio? And we did the math. We went back and forth. We realized that 31 Inktober drawings is good for like building a social media, maybe finding a few more followers that way, or improving in inking, but didn't translate to putting the type of work that he needed to put it into his portfolio. And I said, maybe you're better off, instead of doing 31 drawings, do half as many drawings or don't do it all together and just spend that time doing 4 or 5 portfolio pieces that an animation studio is going to want to see. So that's the advice I give. Like, do one of these challenges if it helps you accomplish your artistic goals. And maybe it's a way that you can shoehorn that challenge into a way to master or accomplish these goals. So maybe you do Mermaid or Kaijun or March of Robots or Dinovember or whatever these challenges are, or Inktober, but you do it in a way where it's definitely going to build out a project that is going to get you to that end goal. So you want to be a children's book illustrator. Maybe your project is you do a children's book about mermaids and every day is an illustration for that children's book, or if maybe you want to get into comics, maybe your Inktober project is development art, concept art for the comic that you want to draw. So every day you take the prompt and you figure out a way to create, a character or an environment or a prop or a vehicle or something that's going to go into this comic. And then you've got all this concept art ready. So when you sit down to draw the comic, you don't have to spin wheels thinking, well, what is this bad guy going to look like? You can just go, I've already drawn him. Now I can do him. So that's my advice there.
I like it.
That's really good. That I'll add a different spin to that too. And what you want to avoid, in my personal opinion, with those kind of challenges is being busy. Is the idea that being busy is moving you forward in some way. You just you don't want to be busy. Just because your pencil's moving does not mean you're moving yourself forward. And that's kind of a different way of saying exactly what Jake's saying. And I love what he's saying is like, have some kind of thing that you're working toward, but watch out for just being overly busy without it leading anywhere, unless you're just enjoying it. Again, if it's not your job and there's no end goal, go for it and draw every day and just have fun with it. Or if you're exploring media, like I've never worked in ink before, or I've started it and I need to get better, that can be an end goal, and that's totally fine. That's a technical kind of thing, and that's where I say those are great for that. But to do a mermaid every day, if you're just like slogging through it and you're not totally enjoying it, but like, okay, I did it, I don't know. It doesn't seem like a good thing to do.
I'm going to piggyback on that and say, just my feeling is I've known people who have done really, really well as far as getting client work from doing the contest. But the thing that I would imagine they all have in common, this is kind of going with what you're saying, Lee, is if you're not going to apply yourself times 10, don't do it.
Mhm.
If you do Inktober, and I would probably also advise people to do Inktober over the other ones, and the reason for that is just the amplification that you get from doing Inktober is bigger than all the others. So if you're gonna do one a year, if you have bandwidth to do one really, really well, and I would also start long before October. I would start many, many
Right.
months before, and I would use it as a vehicle to launch my social media or project it into to double it, triple it, whatever.
That's a great point, Will. How would you say, what do you mean started early? Like start getting concepts together?
I wouldn't leave it to chance. I would say it would be very calculated, and it would be, I'm not drawing the people that have done really, really well in Inktober that I've seen you guys point out, like Jake's pointed out some of them before, are not artists that I've followed. So I'm not pulling up any names right now, but some people have gone, they've treated it like it's more important than an assignment in some cases. It's like, it's something that they've really fallen in love with. And the amount of reshares and likes and the attention, that's what you're looking for any work that you do. But the thing about doing Inktober is it's got so much momentum behind it with so many people doing it that art directors are going to be looking at some of this stuff. So that's.
But I like Inktober too, because you can kind of tailor it to your own subject matter. Some of these other ones are so subject matter specific.
Yeah.
I don't know. I wouldn't draw a mermaid at 30 times, 31 times. I just don't see that happening.
Maybe 2.
Maybe 2, and then I'm sort of done with it.
I would one other thing that I would add to my answer would be, personally, if I were doing it, I would make it into a project that has unity. So it's one big project. And you've done that, Jake, with your poster. I'm sure most people that are listening to the podcast have probably seen your Inktober posters that you've done. I would do something along those lines where it's not only are you working really hard every day, but it's also creating a product at the end of the day.
Right. Every one of my Inktober's, since the very beginning, Inktober drawings that I've done has had a second life as something else. And some of them I've capitalized on and some of them I haven't yet. But they've either turned into a print, or they've turned into a book, or they become back matter for a book, or they've become concept art for another project. Very rarely are they just drawings to draw. And there's nothing wrong with that either. And maybe I should do that once in my life. It's just,
what are you going to do? Are you at liberty to say what you're going to do this time?
Yeah. So I'm doing a third poster, like I did, not a poster, but it's like a print, a long landscape like print full of characters. And the subject matter is going to be Skyheart. So it's all Skyheart characters.
Oh,
cool. So that's exactly what Will was talking about a second ago, is like you got a plan, and then you were talking about having some kind of end goal. So we kind of, you're walking the walk, you're sizzling the steak.
Yes,
my
steak
the sizzle.
Steak is sizzling, and there's a steak with that sizzle, and I'm walking and eating and talking with my mouth full, or talking with my mouth full,
running with scissors,
taking the bull by the horns.
Yeah. Okay, I think
all right.
One more, and then call it good for today.
All right, this will be a good one, I think, that people may get some good info out of. My money is limited. Are student grade art supplies okay? What is the difference between pro and student grade? And I'm going to expand on that to digital supplies. We always get the question, is it okay to do Procreate instead of Photoshop? Do I need Photoshop? So what do people do that are on a budget here? How do they get through this? You guys want to start there?
It is. When I was painting in acrylics, I realized that as a student, I had bought about 3 or 4 times as many tubes as I needed. And I was buying paints that were mixed by the factory. And one of the things you have to remember or realize is that the paint manufacturers want to sell you as much paint as they possibly can. So they mix a lot of those pigments, and come up with beyond tertiary colors, is there a quadrupiary color? I mean, like they come up, you know what I mean? They come up with these weird concoctions that you do not need. And so so to the person who says they're on a budget, if I looked in your toolbox and I saw, let's say 20 tubes, I would say you have at least double the number of tubes that you need, and maybe even triple. And so if you're buying less, but buying the right ones, then you can save money that way. But to me, the professional grade is a must, at least for the technique that I was using. I could not do dry brushing with the student grade because they just add more water and the paint just wasn't thick enough, didn't have enough body to dry brush with. So it was not even possible to use a student grade for what I was doing.
Right. And I should clarify so the difference between a student grade paint and the ones that, offer a lot of volume, but they're cheap, there's a reason for that. And that's they're adding typically fillers and all kinds of stuff to the paint and less pigment. Pigment is expensive. Yeah. So we.
What's that? It just tastes horrible, Will.
Tastes horrible. So one of the things that's interesting about when I teach a beginning painting classes, we talk about this thing specifically, and that's a lot of times you can get student grade paints, put them right next to pro grade paints, put them out. I'll take like an ultramarine blue or something, put them both on the canvas. They both look pretty similar. So the students are like, well, wait, so the student grade's just as good as the pro? And then show them the difference. The difference in student grade paints is once you start mixing, there's not a lot of pigment, right? And so all of a sudden, when you start mixing student grade paints, the vibrancy and the saturation is way less than the pro grade paints. So just pulled out of the tube, they might look the same. The second you start mixing them, the student grade ones are a disaster. Mm-hmm. Now, I do have a hack for that if anybody wants it. If you really are limited in funds, a technique called glazing, which is very transparent paint on the top. And so what I would recommend students do is basically their painting. The colors might be a little washy, a little faded or whatever. And then that last little layer is just a transparent color layer. And man, you can make it the most vibrant paintings you've ever seen with very little paint. So anyway, that's a side deal. I don't want to get too far into techniques, but there's ways to go about it. But I agree with Will, is buy the best paints that you typically can and limit them. Oh, another thing that on what Will just said, if you go to the art store and look at the paints, like say you get a paint, so I'll just make up one, sky blue. You look at the sky blue on the side, they'll list the actual, 3 base paints that sky blue is made out of. And so you should be able to get by with 7 or 8 paints.
Yeah. I will say too, go ahead, Will.
I was going to say I have a list of the paints that I bought that you can make in my acrylic painting class at SVSLearn.com. So there's that. Just throwing that out there. And they're the base number of paints that you can buy or pigments that will allow you to basically replicate as close to possible the rainbow. Mm-hmm. So
that's great.
You just don't want to buy.
I was just going to add. I thought you were done. You're taking these pauses that are way too long.
I'm intentionally giving you.
Finish, Will.
That's John F. Kennedy speaking pattern. Where he's.
No, I'm just saying that if you don't make it up, like get help either from us or from someone else on which paints to buy, because if you buy pre-mixed pigments, you're not going to be able to recreate all the colors that you need.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I will add to, as far as markers, pens, inks, those types of things, you're definitely going to see a difference there as well. The tips will wear out faster. The ink is a little bit waterier. It doesn't come out as rich and as thick. And the colors, again, don't blend as well. So if you're buying cheaper markers than Copics, that's just what you're gonna deal with. And even with the paper too, the paper won't hold up to any sort of beating. You'll start getting the color bleeding through, and even like tearing if you try to erase on it or anything like that. So I wouldn't cheap out on your art supplies, especially if this is something you want to pursue professionally. Save up your money. go with less, either in your personal life, or try to make more art with less. Like Will was saying, use less colors and see what you could do with the limitations that you have. And who knows, you might even make better art with two tubes of paint than if you had 10 tubes of paint.
Great point. My mom took a watercolor class, and the supply list was 20 paints.
Oh yeah.
I was like, come on, man! I only use 7.
Yeah.
Why would she need 20?
Yeah.
She's a beginner. Yeah, that's good. What about software and stuff like that?
Oh, right. So, if you're going to be like making finished, polished illustrations for a children's book, I think you do need Adobe products. You need to sign up for Creative Cloud or something like that.
Are you getting paid for that at all?
No, I wish I was. Adobe, call me up. We could work something out. No, the Photoshop just has so many like color correcting tools in there that's just going to make your life so much easier. InDesign, I've become somewhat proficient in, and that's been hugely helpful in putting books together. And just being able to lay out your books and seeing how everything looks, it's going to look, and they're super grateful too. I think having you do that on the publishing end. If you're doing comics, I think you could get by with Clip Studio Paint, and that's a great program, much cheaper than Photoshop, and I recommend it for concept art or for comic books or for any sort of like illustration work that you're going to do, where maybe you're not building out like a finished book, but it is designed for making comics, so it's good for that. And then Procreate is really good to getting. Procreate will get your stuff 90% there, and I always take them into Photoshop and do like the last 10% in Photoshop, because I could see it on the big screen. I could see it in truer colors. I could see it just feels like I could adjust colors as needed. I can add layers and fix things a little bit better in Photoshop. So this last book, children's book that I did a ton of it on the iPad in Procreate, but I couldn't finish it in Procreate. I had to take it into Photoshop to do the last little bit to it.
If you didn't have the money, you just didn't have the money, you could do a lot with an iPad Pro and Procreate, but it's not. It's still, to me, not 100% there for a professional illustrator.
Well, I'll tell you what I did too. Like when I didn't have a lot of money, every job that I got, I just budgeted out a portion of that money I would get would be go towards a fund to buy a Cintiq, a fund to buy a new computer, a fund to buy Photoshop, to just get me like to the level where I was having the professional tools that I needed. I had a cheap, like tiny scanner, and I was scanning comic book pages in the scanner, half a page. Actually, I would do it in 3 sections and then take it into Photoshop and stitch them together. And that was the cheaper solution, but it was more expensive in that it took way more of my time. But at that time, I had more time than I had money, so I didn't mind doing it. But once I had a little bit more money than I had time, I bought a large scanner so I wouldn't have to spend all that time stitching images together. And so just be thinking long term that you want to get out of that situation where you can't afford the proper tools to do the job that you want to do.
I'll add to that our business, being an illustrator is a business just like any other business. I say that a lot. And our startup costs are so low compared to, like, if you were going to open like a pizza shop, your oven would cost more than all of our tools combined.
Right.
That's not even
for real. I talked to a guy who opened, it's called Bruges up in Utah, and it's Belgian French fries. Basically, they're called frites or whatever. And I was talking to him like, oh, this is so cool. You started this thing. Like, I'm just curious, like, what is it? I didn't ask like specifically like what's it cost, but like what what did you need to actually do this? And he's all, you see that there, that special fryer, it's made in Germany or whatever. He's like, that thing costs $80,000. And I was like, oh,
Right,
wow, you better
right,
sell a ton
exactly.
of French fries.
Yeah, exactly. One of my friends opened a cafe, which you wouldn't think is that big of a deal, but even their like commercial grade, espresso maker thing, it's $20,000.
Wow.
I mean, out the door for us. I mean, oh my gosh, like what? $4,000 could buy you like a home computer, an iPad Pro, and a subscription to Photoshop, and that's kind of all you really need to get going. It's not bad, and that's if you started with nothing. And so, pieces to keep it in perspective, I guess. When somebody says they can't afford Photoshop, and what is that monthly thing? If you're a student, you click the student button on that. I don't know how much it is right now. $50 a month would even probably be more than it is. But if it was $50 a month, that is like, it's not much compared to other businesses.
Right. I'll also add too. I have tried the knockoff Cintiqs, the Chinese-made version.
How did that go?
So initially, opening it up, I was like, well, holy cow, this is a third of the price, maybe less, maybe a fourth of the price. And I'm like, if this does the same job, why would I ever buy a Cintiq? And I could immediately tell there was just a few things where they're cutting corners, that all the plastic felt cheaper, felt thinner, a little bit more wobblier. Fine, whatever, as long as it does the job. And it did the job fine. Pressure sensitivity was great. The image coming through the screen was pretty good, high resolution. But I noticed, like with a Cintiq or with Wacom, the pens you don't ever have to charge. And this one, like, it would run out of batteries and you'd have to plug it in. And so you couldn't use it, right? Or you'd have to remember to like plug it in at night. So there's that. And then one day, 6 months into it, it stopped working. Like, it just wouldn't turn on. And so we had to do some rigging, I don't know, like just had to like mess with it,
bang on it,
plugs and things like that, and hitting it. And it got turned back on, and so it started working again. But I just felt so unreliable that I was like, okay, I could buy a new one of these once a year, once every couple of years, or I could save up the cash, buy something that isn't going to cost me extra time and actually be more reliable and last longer.
Yeah.
So that's my advice there.
My first Cintiq was I couldn't afford the Cintiq, the first one that came out, and I wasn't even sure if I was going to like it. So I definitely didn't want to drop money on the new one. So I just waited around, searching online, found a used one that was a super old model, like a 24-inch super old model, and it was great. It never failed. I ended up selling it to a student after I was done with it. I mean, it was awesome.
Yeah.
Same with me. I got mine used, Cintiq, and that was about 8 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Still going strong. In fact, I think Wacom, they've internally talked about how they make them too good because they don't wear out.
And they'll start making them crappy, so they break, like washing machines and washer dryers. Man, that their planned obsolescence is like a 2 or 3 year window now, whereas my mom used like one for 45 years. It's so different.
Well, they do. These washer and dryers have so many more components to them. Like they're taking the temperature of each individual article of clothing, and the computer's figuring out how much electricity it's going to take to dry that clothing.
Oh man, we don't need that much information. Our cars and our machines are getting too sophisticated.
I know one guy was like, "Yeah, my Tesla knows when I farted." It like turn on the air and like really blow the air out, like refresh the air.
Well, on my trip to Pacific Northwest, we got upgraded, but just because I asked, to this tricked out brand new BMW, and it had some kind of sensor where it could recognize hand gestures and it would turn up the radio. And so I'd just be telling a story to Lisa or talking, and all of a sudden the music would blast through the speakers because I did some hand gesture, and I hated it. But I couldn't turn it off. There's nowhere to turn that on. Like, please stop with the technology.
There is a particular hand signal that you can give the car that will tell it to turn off. I won't say what it is here.
And on that note, let's go ahead and wrap up.
All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us. 3-Point Perspective is made possible by SVSLearn.com, where becoming a great illustrator starts. Seriously, if you haven't subscribed or taken any of the classes, you're missing out. There's some really good, solid content there. If you liked anything we talked about here today, you'll love these classes. Your hosts have been Will Terry, Lee White, and Jake Parker. You can find Will Terry's work online at willterry.com and go follow him. He's dying for new followers. He needs them. At Will Terry Art on Instagram.
That sounds desperate.
Lee White is in even a worse situation over on Instagram. Go follow him at Lee White Illo.
Please. And check out my YouTube channel, which has nothing there, but will have soon.
Go subscribe to his YouTube channel. There will be a video posted there someday. We're looking at early 2020, maybe.
That's a little optimistic.
Okay, LeeWhiteIllustration.com to see his portfolio. Good stuff there. And I'm Jake Parker. I'm at MrJakeParker.com. And I'll take a few new followers on Instagram, at Jake Parker on Instagram. Podcast is edited by Alex Sugg. That's Sugg with 2 G's. And you can contact him to edit your podcast at alexsugg.com. And our podcast is produced by Tanner Garlick. He makes sure this thing gets up on the air so you can listen to it. And you can find his work. He's an artist looking for work at tannergarlickart.com. So if you like this episode, share it around, subscribe to it on iTunes or whatever podcasting place you use, and leave a review, please. We love to see what people think. We should read some reviews recently. I haven't read them in like a month, so I want to see what you guys have been posting on there. That'd be cool. If you want to join on this particular discussion, we've got a vibrant and thriving forum over at svslearn.com. It's free to join. It's very warm. People are just positive and build each other up over there. So go over there. There's a thread devoted just to this episode, and you can check that out. And we'd love to hear what you think. If you have any thoughts that you want to add, or if you disagree with us, yes, we'd love to hear that too. Especially if you disagree with Lee or Will. So that's all for this one. We'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.